Dr. Chandrasekaran, you have already heard about his achievements already, but just for completeness, let me read his bio, okay? It's actually a very impressive bio. Let me just summarize it in 5 minutes. So, Professor Srinivasan Chandrasekaran is the Science Education and Research Board Distinguished Fellow at the Department of Organic Chemistry, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He earned his MSc and PhD from the University of Madras in 1967 and 1972, respectively. He then went to Harvard University to do his postdoctoral work with Professor E.J. Corey. He has also worked as a scientist at Syntax Research, USA during 1975-76. On returning to India, Dr. Chandrasekaran joined the Department of Chemistry, Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, as a lecturer in 1978 and became an assistant professor in 1981 and professor in 1985. He then moved to the Department of Organic Chemistry, Indian Institute of Science in 1989. He held several key positions at IISc, including those of the chair of the Department of Organic Chemistry and Division of Chemical Sciences, as well as Dean of the Faculty of Science. He served as the national convener, Kishore Vaigyanik Protsahan Yojana of the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, the President of the Chemical Research Society of India, the Chairman of the National Organic Symposium Trust, and as the Editor-in-Chief of Tetrahedron Letters published by Elsevier. Dr. Chandrasekaran's research interests include development of new synthetic methods, synthesis of natural products, and catalysis. He received several awards and honors, the most prestigious being the Bhatnagar Award. He is a fellow of Indian National Science Academy, Indian Academy of Sciences, the World Academy of Sciences. So far, he has produced over 40 PhDs, has a patent, and has over 230 publications to his credit. Very impressive. Please join me welcoming Dr. Chandrasekaran to deliver his speech.
Thank you, Professor Narayan, for your kind words. I am again very happy to be here, to be giving this inaugural lecture in this EFCS conference. And I must thank Professor Pradeep for his special invitation to be here. And I've said when the invitation comes from Professor Pradeep, I can't say no to him. And that's why I'm here. And I'm actually happy because Farook College is one which I've been coming here more than once now, and I've also been fond of people here who are very passionate about teaching, passionate about chemistry here. And today, for example, I'm not going to talk about my research work at this stage. I'm going to be talking about something general in nature. Because we are in the 21st century, the main mantra in 21st century is sustainability, sustainable development. Wherever you go, whether you look at a magazine, whether you look at a newspaper, whether you look at a UN forum, or a journalist you talk to, everybody is talking about sustainability and sustainable development and what is it that you can do towards this part. Therefore, the question that we are going to have to ask is, in what way, as chemists, we can contribute to sustainable development? That's really the question. And because we are in the 21st century, what are the kind of challenges that you have which need to be addressed and the priorities that you would like to have as far as sustainability is concerned? And as all of us know, this is a definition from the American Chemical Society. As you know, chemistry is a central science, is an enabling science, and also a mother science, really speaking, because many branches of molecular biology, material science, they all came out of chemistry, really. And of course, plays an important role in conquering diseases, solving energy problems, which of course are very important, and providing the discoveries that lead to new industries and developing new materials and new technologies. And all of us are aware of the important role that chemistry plays as far as our daily life is concerned. But this is where I thought I should probably read the quote from Linus Pauling, who said many, many years ago And he says here, chemistry is a source of happiness. In fact, he goes on to say, I feel sorry for people who do not know anything about chemistry. They are missing an important source of happiness. That probably is true. It is only those who practice chemistry on a day-to-day basis, and the enjoyment, the excitement of doing chemistry is unparalleled in that sense. Chemistry really starts with creativity, because in order for you to be successful in chemistry, in research, you have to be creative. If you are going to be doing something which is an incremental improvement over something, nobody will notice that part. You may have a number of publications that probably would not make a difference, but unless you have a creativity incorporated in your scheme of things, it is not going to make much difference. Therefore, that is an important ingredient for being a successful research chemist in that sense. And this is where then you go from creativity to contributing to sustainability, and of course, more importantly, you talk about human well-being here. And these are important characteristics of chemistry and importance related to what a chemist should be doing in that sense. And therefore, he asked the basic question. Everybody is talking about sustainability. Therefore, he asked the question, what is sustainability really? Because this is where the concept of sustainable development emerged in the so-called in the late 80s in response to need so-called balanced economic and social progress with concern for the environment and stewardship of natural resources. These are two important key words that you have to remember, because you have to have the concern for the environment and of course stewardship of natural resources. That's something which is very, very critical towards sustainability, and this is something that United Nations had in fact declared at that time in 2000, 2002, 2003, if I remember right. They said this 2005 to 2015 would be declared as a decade for sustainable development. But of course, we have already passed 2015. But the idea at that time being to sensitize people, students, teachers, and the industry about the importance of sustainability, and that was really done during that decade. But now we have moved on from 2015, and now things are more complicated, more difficult. And of course, when you talk about sustainability, there are different facets of sustainability really speaking. And it will be looking like sustainability, the so-called the middle, really speaking. It can be environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and social sustainability. When you talk about environmental sustainability, it's very straightforward. You can understand that easily. Whatever we do today as a product that you make, by involving chemistry, you will have to see as to whether it will have a deleterious effect in the atmosphere, in the environment, whether it will create problem for the future generation. Therefore, that is easy to understand. Therefore, whatever we do, one keeps track of the damage that we can do to the environment. Therefore, that becomes a critical part of environmental sustainability. No problem there. And what is other important part of sustainability is the so-called economically sustainable. That means you come up with any product, device, material that you make out of research in chemistry, and it is going to be used by the common man, and you are going to have to make sure if it is too expensive, it is beyond the reach of the common man, it is not going to be sustainable. Which means then it has to be a material which is smart, material which is useful, material that is easily made and also can be made economically viable and in a relatively inexpensive kind of a thing. Only then it can have a sustainable process. If it is too expensive, after a few years, only the rich can afford and the common man will be left out, and therefore you will not have economic sustainability as far as that is concerned. The third aspect of social sustainability, the social equity that one looks at, is when you have something, how does the common man or the mankind looks at it? They usually use it for some time, but very often you will find there are a lot of products coming to the market. They stay there for a few years. After some time, they disappear. Mainly because people find there are some problems, inherent problem associated with them, which they realize over a period of short 2-3 year period. And that means over a period of time, it has to be socially acceptable by the common man on a regular usage. And that means the materials that you produce today will have to have a general acceptability by the common man. That's the most important in order for it to sustain for long periods of time. Therefore, these are the factors that one looks into account. And I think way back in 1987, the Portland Commission, they provided a report to the United States, and they said sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability to future generations to meet their own needs. That means whatever one does today, one worries about whether this will have a problem for the coming generation. Or you leaving something as a legacy which is bad for the future generation. That's what one worries about. Now what has happened as far as the United Nations are concerned, they had this 2005 to 2015 as a decade for sustainable development. But it had some effect, all right, but then they realized it was not complete. It was just the beginning. Therefore, they realized now, they came up with the Sustainable Development Goals for the period of 2015 to 2030. That means we are still another 7-8 years to go. And the kind of goals that they have set up are 17 goals there that you can see. What you find interesting is there are quite a few of them. At least 6 of the 17 goals map into chemical sciences. You look at the good health and well-being. Obviously, chemistry will have a role there. Clean water and sanitation will have a role there. And of course, you are looking at the so-called, the clean energy part. Obviously would look at affordable energy, and then you are going to looking at responsible consumption and production of material, and you are going to be looking at climate action, and climate change is an important part where again chemistry will play an important role, and life on land, life in water, all this below water, all these are going to be chemist's prerogative, and chemists can and will possibly contribute towards these things. And therefore, you can look at the major challenges to sustainable chemistry in the 21st century are good health and well-being, where chemistry will have a role, because you are talking about drugs and materials that you are going to produce to take care of things. And of course, you have clean water and sanitation, affordable clean energy, industries, innovation and infrastructure, and responsible consumption and production, and of course, climate change. So all these are the 6 of the major United Nations goal that one is going to have to look at, and therefore they are important that one has to worry about. So therefore he asked the question, what will be the role of chemistry in achieving the so-called Sustainable Development Goals of United Nations? Of course, the minute you see this, you will realize there are opportunities for new chemical research comes in there. And also you find the green and sustainable chemistry education is important. What was started off as green chemistry in the 90s, now it has become sustainable chemistry subsequently, and then to the present day it is called circular chemistry. I will come to that part soon. But people have to be sensitized, educated about evolution of this process that has been going on. And of course, you have to look at the industry will have to be sensitized now. So green and sustainable chemical manufacturing practices will have to be in place. And of course, a sense of social responsibility will have to come in. And all this will be the one where chemists will play an important role according to American Chemical Society. And of course, as far as energy is concerned, everybody knows this. I'm not saying anything new. What is known, and this is a report of the 2019, the Review of World Energy, it talks about essentially the sea, oil, coal and gas, the one has the maximum contribution towards energy, and these are things to a large extent we know are not renewable. They are probably going to disappear after X number of years. And there is very little contribution really from hydropower, nuclear, wind, solar and other renewable, which means then it is very clear that most of the efforts in the so-called emerging frontiers of chemical sciences would be the one where one is going to have to worry about some of these processes and there make it better and reduce the so-called dependency on coal, gas and oil in the process. And another thing that again, something which you see all the time in the newspapers and magazines about the so-called atmospheric carbon dioxide and climate change, and this is global warming that everybody is aware of. And this is, of course, we know carbon dioxide concentration has been steadily, slowly, but steadily going, very, very slowly, but nevertheless, going from somewhere around 330 parts per million to about 415. And that is a slow, but nevertheless, there has been an increase over a period of time up to 2020. And what really happens is fossil fuels like coal and oil, fossil fuels like coal and oil contain, of course, carbon that plants pull out from the atmosphere through photosynthesis, which over millions of years these are produced as a fossil fuel. But what we have done, on the other hand, would be returning that carbon to the atmosphere in just a few hundred years. And that's the folly, that is the problem related to the use of fossil fuel that all of us are aware of. Therefore, something needs to be done and has to be done there. And therefore, you ask now, you started off with green chemistry, which was started by Paul Anastas and John Warner in the 90s, which was to a certain extent sensitized chemists and chemical industries about pollution, about waste and so on, but that is not enough. And therefore, at that point, around 2010, 2015, people started talking about what is known as sustainable chemistry. It is an improved version, we would call, all right? And sustainable chemistry is a scientific concept that seeks to improve the efficiency with which natural resources are used to meet human needs for chemical products and services. And so what really is looking at is, I'll probably go to the next one to say, and it is very interesting to see, when I'm looking at an article that was published in Chemical Engineering News 2019, there is a debate in the US Congress on, I don't know whether it will happen ever in India, but the US Congress trying to debate and differentiate between so-called green chemistry and sustainable chemistry. And they actually try to come up and clearly demarcate as to what is it you're talking about in these cases, and how is it important for chemistry and for the general mankind. And so here, according to the US Environmental Protection Agency, which gave a report to the US Congress, it says green chemistry is the design of chemical products and eliminate the generation of hazardous materials. There is no problem. And that is something that all of us know for many years. But the sustainable chemistry is really one where the scientific this is like an expanded version of green chemistry. Much more taken into account rather than a simple principle of green chemistry. A scientific concept that seeks to improve the efficiency with which natural resources are used to meet human needs for chemical products and processes. Which means then it is a much wider scope, more inclusive in many things there. And so what it really comes out of the US Congress debate is sustainable chemistry is something you can practice, but you cannot do that without, in the absence of green chemistry, sustainable chemistry cannot be done. That means the basic premise for doing sustainable chemistry is you have to have green chemistry, but that alone is not enough. It is much more beyond that, and therefore you have to have a knowledge and application of green chemistry, but sustainable chemistry is further beyond, including, has more in scope in that process. So therefore you talk about grand challenges in environmental molecular science. What one has to understand there clearly is there is a need to obtain a more detailed molecular understanding of the components of air, water and soil. This is very critical for you to do any major contribution towards any of these processes. As all of us know, water is an important part. We in fact had water mission in the country, people doing research on water. So what is it that can be done? This is a very important facet of human life. Therefore, many things that we don't understand as far as this is concerned is very important for you to analyze and learn better. And George Whiteside at Harvard University talks about great challenges in the education. And he talks about that is important, the need for new educational initiatives to come. There's no question about that, to talk about sustainability, and need for industry and academics to kind of interact, collaborate, cooperate with each other, and main common ground there should be sustainability issues. And the chemistry, educate the chemistry student and the public the importance of science of sustainability issues. And this is what, according to George Whiteside, a very important thing that the government of the day, wherever they are, will have to keep that in mind and find out in what way they can make this improvement. So if you want to do that part, what are the kind of enabling research areas and technologies that you have? There are many things that are there. But the one that comes to mind very quickly, obviously you are talking about new materials. There are things that always we are interested in new material because they have to perform a certain function. I talked about it in the initial introductory remark. You need to have a way of designing material with a specific purpose and what they are going to perform. Therefore, you have to have discoveries from nanoscience, a new and better material for sustainability research need to continue. And that's something, there is no question about that. And bioprocess is something which is again very important because it can be done on a large scale without damaging the environment and more other problems associated with them. Therefore, key advances in bioprocess can contribute to the chemistry, the advances in sustainability. And the third and most important one as far as chemistry is concerned, where it can contribute enormously to sustainability, is catalysis. Because every chemist who does chemistry, practice chemistry, knows the importance of catalysis. Catalysis is an important enabling research area of sustainability. Because you have to then realize you need to understand, you need to have theories to predict the outcome from the discovery of new catalysts. That means you need to have experimentalists to do the work, generate catalysts, make catalysts, design them. But you need to have the support and the enabling part from theoreticians and computational chemists and so on and so forth. And you also have to see, to explain how they work. Most of the time, there is a poor understanding of how catalysts work. We have only a very rough idea, superficial in a way, of what happens in a catalytic process. And therefore, it is important for us to understand how they work and the need for more accessible facilities to identify catalytically active and selective heterogeneous materials. This again is a very important area of chemistry that all of us will have to think of. So that means basic research in chemistry will play a pivotal role in driving the science and technology innovation needed for achieving a sustainable future in what we call as a fairly complex world. And when you look at that, in any modern chemistry, and in any society, doesn't matter which government, which country you are from, in order for science to progress, and of course particularly for chemistry to progress, you have three groups that are involved there. What are the three groups that are there? You will find, in order to build modern chemistry, you are talking about the university system, the higher education institutions, the chemical industry, and the government. These are the three pillars, really speaking, are important for growth of any country as far as science or chemistry is concerned. The chemical industry that all of us know has existed for over a century. It has been there a long period of time. The research university that all of us are, whether it is a college, postgraduate institution, or a university, state or central, or IITs, or whatever, and all of them have one major important task, that is to build human resource. Human resource development is the main thing. That means this is where people are going to be trained for doing research, and therefore they set out to the world to serve the nation, and they can serve the nation either in the chemical industry or go to the government in the public sector system and use their expertise, what they have learned, to contribute to nation's growth. And therefore that is important. The government, of course, builds. What is the role of the government in this matter? You are going to say government builds capabilities in universities. That means it is important to build new universities and build capabilities in the system and that support science and technology research in the country. That is a major thing that is done. But as you have to know, the chemical industry was the core of chemistry before the research university came into being. Even before the research university was there, the chemical industry was there because you needed material. You needed things to be given to mankind, whether it was done scientifically or not, but the chemical industry existed before that part. And therefore, the major role of the chemical industry was as a producer of material, fuels and chemicals on a commercial scale, commercial basis. Because they are interested in making money, but at the same time they were serving the country by making available important compound processes, products that are needed by mankind. Government plays an important role in chemical enterprise because it provides the funds for much of academic research. All of us know there is some funding probably from private. To a large extent, most of our university research and higher educational institution research are done with governmental support. Whether you're talking about DST, DBT, CSIR, or BARC, whatever, all of them are government-supported research institutions. They provide research funding. And of course, the government also does what you call as channels the industry through appropriate laws that are made, regulation, taxes, and provide the revenue. Therefore, when you talk about the relationship between the government and universities, to a large extent, only through what we call as the peer review system. Because when you say you are working in a university or in a higher educational institution and you want to get money for what you would like to do. So obviously what you do, you submit a research proposal, and this is where you have the mechanisms of, like in a CRB, you have your program advisory committees for each subject they have, and they meet, they evaluate, and everything is done because the government has set up the process. And therefore, peer review was originally kind of established to place the responsibility for allocation of government funds to individual projects. The government doesn't do that directly, obviously, because they try to give it the responsibility to scientists who are the committee members of your so-called SCRB or DST, as the case may be. They evaluate the scientific merits or otherwise of a project, and then it is done, and that still is a government role. And therefore, it's not done by the bureaucrats, fortunately. But in spite of that, people say there are problems. This, of course, was pointed out by George Whitesides in one of the recent articles. As I mentioned earlier, catalysis is a very, very important basic thing as far as chemistry is concerned. And more importantly, heterogeneous catalysis and biological catalysis, biocatalysis. These are two important things. Of course, homogeneous catalysis has been there for a long time. But one of the major difficulties with homogeneous catalysis has been the so-called recovery of the catalyst, and reuse of the catalyst has been a difficulty. And therefore, more emphasis being placed on bioprocesses and heterogeneous catalysis. So one of the important skills of chemistry, of course, is catalysis. But in spite of all the work that we have done over the long period of time, there is very little that we know about this catalyst, about this particular area. Many things are kind of done with some kind of an intuitive way, not necessarily fully understanding how they function. Again, this is what I probably mentioned in my introductory remarks. The Haber-Bosch process for synthesis of ammonia, first commercialized by BASF. The patent was made in 1908, if I remember, and it was commercialized around 1913. But even today, this is the best process available for production of ammonia. But still, the intricacies of this process is not fully understood. This is true for many other catalytic processes which are commercially known, being practiced, but still do not fully understand the mechanisms of these processes that generate fuel, chemicals, and material. Therefore, one has to be aware, while you may be using them, but the full understanding of what exactly happened in these catalytic processes is not fully appreciated. That's the problem. Again, another thing that people very often kind of overlook, underestimate, is the importance of analytical chemistry. Because you have to remember, if any new area develops, for example, today we are talking about nanoscience, nanotechnology. See, this could not have been done 30 years ago when you did not have atomic force spectroscopy, TEM, SEM. If you were not there, you could not have done the kind of advances we have made today in nanoscience and nanotechnology, because you need to have the analytical techniques available, and that actually helps a particular new area to develop. Therefore, analytical chemistry is a more important area. People do not realize the importance of that part, because one of the important steps in opening new areas of science is the minute you want a new area to be developed, you need to have an appropriate set of measurement techniques available for doing what you would like to do. If you don't have them, the new area will not succeed. That is the problem. Therefore, either you have to wait until some things are available to handle a problem of that kind. And renewable fuels is something that I mentioned, because we are talking about energy, we are talking about the oil, gas, etc. We need to kind of move away, and has to, there's no question about that. Therefore, what are the options available to us? Something like biomass, landfill gas, wind, solar, and photovoltaic technology will have to play an important role. And you have to find ways by which the so-called biomass can be converted into very meaningful products and can be used for energy. And of course, Einstein said that many years ago, the world will not evolve past its current state of crisis by using the same thinking that created the situation. It means then, if you keep thinking about the same way that you've been doing earlier, you will not come up with anything new. You have to move out and probably think out of the box if you really want to make some meaningful insight into what needs to be done and change the system. And that's what the importance of this. And this is a very interesting thing. I don't know how many of you have seen this part. There are two books that I want many of you to kind of even look at and read. There are two books known as Biomimicry. This is Innovation Inspired by Nature. This is published by Janine Venus. This is a very, very interesting book. Talks about how by observing nature, by looking around you and see what nature does, whether it is bird, whether it is animal or what have you, and based on their behavior, the way they do things, and try to come up with a so-called device, product that can be made to mimic that part. And that is something which is important. So biomimicry is very, very nice. So therefore, listen to nature and learn from nature has been a very major important thing in the so-called the early part of 2000. There's another book which is, in my opinion, is even more important, is, as far as chemistry is concerned, is something known as Cradle to Cradle. The Cradle to Cradle is a book which was published probably in the early 2000s, if I remember, 2002, 2003. And here the main mantra there in the book is remaking the way we make things. That's the real message from that book. How do you remake things? The way you make things. And that's important because according to them, this is by Stahel and Bernhardt, if I remember, they talk about the main message for them is being less bad is no good. So that's the message. That means it is less bad, therefore it is okay. No. Being less bad is not good enough. It has to be better than that part. That is the message. And that means what is it that you are talking about in a so-called cradle to cradle? You are talking about a cyclic situation there. That means a phrase was invented by Stahel in the 70s, but it became popular only after the book was published in 2002 by McDonough and Bernhardt. And they essentially talk about, emphasize the importance of what you call, seek to create production techniques that are not only efficient. Efficiency is fine. But it has to be more than efficiency, but are also essentially waste-free in the process. That means while the product may be 100% efficient that you want to make, but in the process you make a lot of waste material that is not good enough. Therefore, whatever you do, we'll have to make sure that it's being used up in the process. Therefore, no waste is thrown out of this part. And therefore, the cradle-to-cradle production, all material inputs and outputs are seen either as a technical or a biological nutrient in a way. That means nothing is wasted in a process. It is a general idea there. It is completely a cyclic process, circular process, if you would like to call that. Whereas when you're talking about a cradle to grave, essentially you're talking about a one-way street. You talk about something you make, the process of making it, you have a lot of waste, something byproduct, side product, whatever comes out, and you throw them away. You kind of discard them and put them in the environment to land, water, what have you. And therefore, the one-way street of this kind is the one which is referred to as a cradle-to-grave situation. And that is something particularly related to chemical industry, a company taking responsibility for the disposal of goods it has produced, rather than not worrying about, in the first place, can that be prevented? And that is not done. But not necessarily putting product constituent component back into service. Therefore, you are talking about a process which is cyclic, a process which is a one-way linear thing. This was done even in the early 2000s, but now it has taken a new avatar in the last 10 years. This is what I will come to. Now we are talking about what is known in the last, I think after 2015, everybody is talking about what is known as circular economy, circularity in everything that is done, that is going to contribute towards the economy of any country. And in fact, the European Parliament came up with this definition for circular economy. You can see here, this is actually a report by the European Commission here. Circular economy definition, importance and benefits. European Parliament came out with this in 2015, February. February. And here he talks about production and consumption, which involves sharing, leasing, reusing, repairing, refurbishing, and recycling existing materials and products as long as possible. That means we are really even talking about providing to a certain extent, if you may call that as immortality to products that you make. Is that a good thing? One does not know. But try to keep the life of that as much as possible so that you don't throw that away, was the general idea. And this is, of course, the blog that came out in, I think, Chemical Engineering News by Sophia Soil, still in September 2020. There's a blog that she talks about the circular economy in a cartoon form, where she talks about, obviously, the key feature is reuse, repair, and recycle. And in the I'm sorry. And it says, sorry, I came to it. In this one, you have to look at a recycling sector, you have a production sector, you have a distribution sector, consumption sector. All will have to kind of be in a cyclic form. Then only it will contribute to the circular economy. I mean, nothing really gets out of that cycle. That is the idea there. This is a cartoon on biomimicry that has been done a few years ago, about 2-3 years ago. And this again is a new avatar of the earlier cradle to cradle or cradle to grave hypothesis that was put forward in the early 2000s. Now, as I said, you talk about in 2016, Catherine Whitman in 2016 pointed out the so-called linear approach of take, make, use, dispose, and pollute. This is what we call linear approach. It's called cradle to grave situation, linear economy. On the other hand, you try to look at a process of what you would call as a circular economy approach is one where you make, use, reuse, remake, and recycle, and then make again. Therefore, this becomes the circular path. And therefore, this is what is going to be the future for science in general and future of chemistry, particularly in the chemical industry and pharma industry. This is going to be a very, very important role that people have to remember. Again, one takes a lesson from Lavoisier, who kind of discovered oxygen many, many years ago, and he made a very profound statement which probably is true today. And he said, nothing is lost, nothing is created. Everything is only transformed from one form to another. Which means then there's nothing like waste, really speaking. That's the important lesson that one learns, which is true even today. Now, this is where I have to tell you. There is a group of people here, very distinguished chemists, Stephen Macklin from UK, Professor Mehta from University of Hyderabad, Henrik Hoff from Germany, and Alain Cree from Belgium. They formed a group of what is known as concerned chemist elders who are trying to talk about and write perspective articles from time to time about the dangers of the practice of chemistry. And in this one, there are many perspective articles that have been written, and this was published in Nature Chemistry in 2015, and they talk about waste, and according to them, this is something I quote, waste, according to them, waste does not exist. Why? Chemical matter only changes form. That's what Lavoisier said. Essentially, it is reworked now. So waste is actually material awaiting further use. That's what basically all about. And this is where you have to worry about not the green chemistry per se, not the sustainable chemistry per se as the second generation, but what you talk about as the circular chemistry will actually practice. That means you are slowly evolving from the original green chemistry of the 90s to sustainable chemistry of the 2000s, and now you are talking about after 2015, a circular chemistry which talks about waste as a material which had to be reused and done again. And of course, actually, a couple of later, in 2019, there are very nice, very interesting articles by these two groups here. Nature 2019, Nature Chemistry 2019, very interesting article on circular economy and how for circular economy you need to have the practice of circular chemistry. And this is very interesting article that you have to read. These are very, very profound in what they say. And of course, the main mantra, as you can find, is collect and use waste, maximize atom circulation, optimize resource efficiency, strive for energy persistence, enhance process efficiency, and so on and so forth. But these are so-called jargon as far as this is concerned. The main part of what you have to look at is collect and use waste. That's the main mantra there. And therefore, this process will have to be a circular process involving a number of steps there. That is basically what it is. And this is a very, very important message that one talks about. And there is another person by the name Janine Kramer in Canada. She came up with what is known as the 10R principle. It was published in 2017. This 10R principle, according to Kramer, has 10 R's there. And they are refuse, reduce, renew or redesign, reuse, repair, refurbish, remanufacture, repurpose, recycle and recover. When I first saw that, the first thing did not make any, I didn't know what it was. And what is the refuse thing that you're talking about? And that is part of what we call as circular chemistry. And that is very clear what she is talking about in refuse is refuse to accept material that cannot be recycled. For example, they're going to a shop and buy material and they give it to you in a so-called disposable plastic bag. You refuse to accept that part. This is something which is going to contribute to the chemistry. That's what she says, which is not found anywhere else, that I thought was an interesting thing of refusing materials like the lightweight plastic material that one kind of normally throws away. Something, the use of that you should be refusing to do is what is an important message out of that part. And if you cannot do 10 of them, and at least find out what are the minimum 5 R's that you have to have in order to practice circular chemistry. And according to the 5 R's that people generally accept now in the last couple of years is reduce, reuse, repurpose, recycle and recover. I mean, these 5 R's are the one which is going to contribute to a large extent towards circular chemistry. And now what they say, talking about is what was originally a sustainable chemistry, and that you have circular chemistry, and therefore the new future mantra obviously will be sustainable circular chemistry. Is what one is probably worried about in the next 10-15 years or so, as far as practice of chemistry is concerned. And there is another very interesting article, again by the same group of Steve Macklin, Professor Mehta, and Henrik Hoff, and Alain Cleave, along with Sarah O'Connell. They wrote an article in Chemical Science. This was only a couple of months ago, you have to remember. This was published in October 2022. Extremely, this is again, in my opinion, I must say, those who are practicing chemistry have to read this article, because they are talking about something which is very, very important. And here they say, chemistry must respond to the crisis of transgression of planetary boundaries. So at the cursory glance, it doesn't tell you what it is. It's a very, very important paper, very interesting perspective article in chemical science. And it's a beautiful one, but initially I didn't notice that. But what I did find subsequently was, there was an article that came out in Chemistry World that was published in 4th October 2022 by Connor Shepard, wrote more like an analysis of that paper, which came out in Chemical Science. Only then I noticed that paper. And this paper, essentially this thing that came out in Chemistry World, essentially summarizes the material that is there in the chemical science paper and try to kind of give a gist of what is there, what is important. Highlighting the important facets of that paper, talking about the transgression. And here, of course, the main thing they say is a call for chemists to reorientate chemistry as a sustainability science. That is the mantra. Now I will try to show you the general analysis and summary of what Connor Shepard had done, because that is a beautiful analysis and summary based on what I could make out. I read both of them. The other paper, chemical science paper, is longer, a detailed paper, whereas this one is a summary of what is in there. And that makes a lot of impact to me. You can see here, according to them, so this is something I quote from that summary of Connor Shepard. And here you see the group led by Stephen Macklin, Imperial College London in the UK, stresses that the sustainability of any given product must be assessed comprehensively rather than on single issues. This is where one talks about, can I say it absolves the principles of green chemistry, so therefore it is okay. According to them, no. Individual factors such as deriving a product from a renewable source, manufacturing based on green chemistry principles, or post-use recycling are not enough to label a product sustainable if planetary boundaries are still transgressed somewhere within the system, is the message that comes out. And of course, there are many ways of looking at and many examples that one looks at in the literature. And according to them, they take out from that paper, many fundamental chemistry practices will need to be reassessed. In organic chemistry, for example, the overwhelming reliance on hydrocarbon-related products as the starting material versus, I mentioned that in my introductory remark. I mean, all of us take for granted many of these compounds like benzene, toluene, acetone, etc. as the starting material, which are derived from these kind of petroleum feedstock or from fossil fuel. But that cannot be done. We have to reassess that part, which means you have to look at there is a problem because you know that is self-evidently problematic and alternatives must be pursued is what the message is all about. That's what I mentioned in my intro remark. And again in plastics, the redesign and invention of novel structures will be necessary. This again is going to be an emerging frontier as far as chemistry is concerned. And of course I also mentioned about this in my introductory remarks about the lithium. That is the issue of elements stewardship, not only for materials with low abundance levels and restricted distribution. For example, lithium, which is used as a kind of a battery thing, and which obviously is not available enough. And only in certain small countries like in Argentina and Bolivia, you have major supply. And it's also dwindling. Therefore, what do you do? Therefore, alternatives have to be pursued for doing things of that kind, is what the message of this thing is. So, then eventually what one talks about, this is a summary that comes in. As the science of transforming matter, many of chemists' successes up to now have come at a cost to the environment and to the stability of Earth's vital system. That is really what I'm talking about as the transgression of system boundaries. The scientists therefore conclude, according to them, they summarize, in the future, research should maintain an awareness of the planetary boundary and the biogeochemical flows that threaten them. And industry must commit to use all available tools to avoid further transgression. Is the message that comes out. I'm finished now, almost. Essentially, that's what one is trying to talk about. What I was essentially trying to get across to you is what started off as a principle of green chemistry of the 80s and early 90s by Paul Anastas and John Warner, particularly to sensitize chemical industries about indiscriminate throwing away of material. Then it came or developed into a more inclusive concept of sustainable chemistry in the early 2000s, and now it has gone beyond that. It is now green chemistry to sustainable chemistry and sustainable chemistry to circular chemistry, where everything that is needed to be as a waste, you do not look at it as a waste. Therefore, you have to find a way of using waste for transforming it to something useful, value add to your waste is what the message is all about. And therefore, it is that message. In fact, again, I ask those of you who are interested should read this chemical science article as well as the chemistry world article, which summarizes beautifully what is the need of the hour as far as practice of chemistry in the 21st century is concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chandrasekaran, for the impressive talk. We have time for a few questions. Pradeep sir.
Chandrasekaran's talk for the college, I would like him probably to comment on how sustainability chemistry can be coming into curriculum. How can we contribute to this?
Sorry. It is very true. For example, you may recall when the green chemistry was introduced, it slowly got into the curriculum because of the efforts of DST at that time, formed a task force on green chemistry, and therefore slowly, in fact, you may recall that I was the chair of the task force at that time, and we made sure we go to every single college, university in the country, and at least sensitize. That was the idea. Not that, of course, we cannot force anything on anybody. Essentially, sensitize young people about this new concept and how it is important, and you have to know about this. And you decide for yourself, is that what you would like to do? And therefore, you have courses on green chemistry was done at that time. I'm talking about almost 30 years ago. But after that, the so-called further developments of this are to be more inclusive, sustainable chemistry and circular chemistry has to be introduced as part of the same thing, but an expanded version, really speaking. And because the whole thing is really, as I said, it is sustainable chemistry now, eventually. And that is what one has to be looking at. And it has to be introduced, and students, particularly in the postgraduate level, should know about this. There's an importance of this. Therefore, when they start their own research, they keep at least the back of their mind as to whether they can do something towards that part. That's all that to it. Nothing more, because there's many of these things won't work by legislation. It has to come from within, by sensitizing people who are, of course, more important for the industries as well. Because these are our people who work with us. You train the manpower in your laboratory, in your lab, and these are the people who go out and work in the industry. And these are the people who go out and work in DST in policy making. Therefore, they should probably get involved and do things there and change. This is my view.
Thank you.
Other questions from our students?
Anybody?
Young mind.
You should have some curiosity questions always. It is important that you ask questions. I may not know the answer for everything, obviously, but at least you'll try. That's why you learn. That's how you learn.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for your wonderful session. As sir already talked, there are a lot of materials, polymer materials are
Sure.
coming in research.
Yeah.
It is only aiming for the single issue, single use.
Yeah.
But as you already talked.
Sure.
For example, solar panels, it's converting solar energy to
Sure,
electrical energy,
sure.
but it's environmentally.
Sure.
It is not really sustainable development.
Sure.
So as you already talked, we should that reconsider to develop our research principles.
Sure.
So what are your thoughts on this, sir?
That's why I said, if you are talking about making a material, don't make a material only for, that is why what we have been doing all along. We made material, either the materials are available or they're easy to make something, and then try it afterwards, see what property will it have, what kind of use we can put it to. That is like, like a shot in the dark in a way. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But what I'm talking about, the more challenging and difficult part is, per se, when you are talking about a material that you want to make, your design elements will have to take into account, and that will have the properties that you want. And in that sense, you may be able to make changes. That is where what you call as basic understanding, curiosity-driven research, basic science is important, because unless you do that, you will make only minor incremental changes, make a slightly better product. That will not solve your problem in the long run.
So is it really practical to get the sustainable development to is it practical?
Of course,
completely?
Of course, these are all relative in a way. There's nothing like a foolproof 100% way of solving the problem. But you have to attempt to do that. Part is what one is looking at. Number one, first of all, you have to be sensitized about the importance of this issue. And two, what is it that you can make improvement for the current situation? And that's what you can do. And then you learn from your mistake. Most of the time you have to remember, The mistakes that you make are the one that teaches you more about your problem. And then you know what needs to be done or should not be done in doing some chemistry. Therefore, you learn most of the time from things that did not work, that did not go the way you wanted them. So the failures very often teach you about what actually should not be doing. And that, of course, so that nobody else or somebody else will not waste his time on doing things and learn that is not working, that is not good. So that is why it is important for him to do that. But nothing like a 100% safe solution, no. I mean, that will be what you are looking at is an ideal thing. I don't think we will ever reach an ideal situation of that kind. Probably not.
Thank you, sir.
Maybe time for one more question. Okay, if there are no more questions, let us thank Dr. Chandrasekaran again for his wonderful talk. And let me hand over, with your permission, to Dr. Chandrasekaran a small token of love.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, you're taking a picture there. Thank you.